Soldiers stationed at the NATO headquarters welcomed the Prime Minister. He told them as he flew in, he'd caught his first glimpses of the devastation.
To understand why the West have supported extremists, you need to look at the bigger picture, or chessboard. It's a strategy. Historically, Yugoslavia was one nation comprised of 6 republics: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Montenegro, Macedonia, and finally Serbia, which contained Kosovo. Each republic had a seat on the federal presidency and some localized power. In 1987, as communism was on its last legs, Slobodan Milosevic rose to power in Yugoslavia and backed a Serbian revolt. He became the president of Serbia in 1989. Although there's no denying Milosevic's military actions against Albanian Muslims, he was democratically elected and didn't magic up the conflict out of thin air. The idea that he was the next Hitler, hell-bent on ethnic cleansing and taking over the whole of Yugoslavia, is a distorted concept encouraged by the West, but it fails to give any real context to the war. Prior to this rise of Serbian nationalism, and this idea of a Serbian tyranny under Milosevic, which was causing thousands of Muslims to flee, there was in fact quite a high exodus of Serb and Montenegrin citizens due to the tyranny from the Muslim Albanians. This is rarely discussed today by the media, who'd have you believe that it all started with Milosevic. But if we go back to the 80s, you can find examples in the mainstream press. As reported by the New York Times on July 12, 1982, according to Basai Hoti, an executive secretary of the Communist Party of Kosovo, the Albanian nationalists have a 2-point platform. First, to establish what they call an ethnically clean Albanian republic, and then the merger with Albania to form a Greater Albania. Mr. Hoti expressed concern over political pressures that were forcing Serbs to leave Kosovo. On April 24, 1987, Milosevic went to Kosovo to consult with the local communist officials about the serious economic and social problems in the region, especially the exodus of Serbs under Albanian communism. The New York Times reported on November 1st, 1987, ethnic Albanians in the government of Kosovo have manipulated public funds and regulations to take over land belonging to Serbs. Slavic Orthodox churches have been attacked, and flags have been torn down. Wells have been poisoned and crops burned. Slavic boys have been knifed, and some young ethnic Albanians have been told by their elders to rape Serbian girls. The goal of the radical nationals among them, one said in an interview, is an ethnic Albania that includes Western Macedonia, Southern Montenegro, part of Southern Serbia, Kosovo, and Albania itself. As Slavs flee the protracted violence, Kosovo is becoming what ethnic Albanian nationalists have been demanding for years, and especially strongly since the bloody rioting by ethnic Albanians in Pristina in 1981. An ethnically pure Albanian region. Yet despite these reports, the media now conveniently forget true history and call Milosevic himself the ethnic cleanser.
The wars he deliberately provoked as he broke up the former Yugoslavia marked the conscience of Europe. ethnic cleansing, the concentration camps, the siege of Sarajevo, the genocide at Srebrenica.
In truth, despite even the initial Albanian offensive, there was no real ethnic cleansing from either side. It was just a war. And as all wars go, its roots were deeply complicated. At that time, favouring the Albanians and demonising Milosevic and the Serbians supported the Western idea of one world order.
We act to prevent a wider war, to defuse a powder keg at the heart of Europe that has exploded twice before in this century with catastrophic results. And we act to stand united with our allies for peace. By acting now, we are upholding our values, protecting our interests, and advancing the cause of peace. Tonight I want to speak with you about the tragedy in Kosovo and why it matters to America that we work with our allies to end it.
A region that is divided is a region that can be subjected to outside interference from the West, from the UN and from NATO. During Milosevic's visit, the communist Albanian police attacked Serbs who had gathered to protest the lack of legal protection and the general ruin of the region. Milosevic famously told them, "No one should beat you anymore. If this is extreme nationalism, perhaps there should be more of it." This speech is often cited out of context to claim that Milosevic went to Kosovo to start his nationalist ethnic campaign. If anything, he was standing up for the Serbians' right to protest under the Albanians' own nationalist campaign. In fact, later on, Milosevic denounced nationalism altogether.
Nema drugog rješenja nego rješenja koje će podjednako zaštititi interese sva tri naroda.
We should not allow the misfortunes of people to be exploited by nationalists, whom every honest person must combat. We must not divide people between Serbs and Albanians, but rather we should separate on the one hand decent people who struggle for brotherhood, unity and ethnic equality, and on the other hand counter-revolutionaries and nationalists. As Milosevic went on to be elected, the natural tension increased and a civil war erupted. Although at the time we were led to believe that there was some kind of Hitlerian crusade led by Milosevic, causing NATO to intervene.
Over 600,000 people have already made the treacherous journey. Even more are now on their way. Others, many elderly, are left behind.
The truth is, like in Afghanistan, the West had begun funding covert terrorist groups to foment the conflict. Most of what is cited as Milosevic's crimes occurred after the NATO bombings. Albanian Muslims weren't so much fleeing from a savage Serbian army, but from the mess caused by the NATO invasion and Western intelligence operations.
Milosevic was committed many crimes. Not a nice person, terrible person. But the charges against him would never have held up. He was originally indicted on the Kosovo charges. The indictment was issued right in the middle of the bombing, which already nullifies it. They admittedly used British and U.S. intelligence. This was right in the middle of the bombing. Can't possibly take seriously. However, if you look at the indictment, it was for crimes committed after the bombing. There's one exception, Vracek. Well, let's even grant that the claims are true. Let's put it aside. All right, so there was one exception. No evidence that he was involved or we don't know what took place. But almost the entire indictment was for after the bombing. How are those charges going to stand up unless you put Bill Clinton and Tony Blair on the dock alongside him?
The late investigative journalist Daniel Pearl reported in the Wall Street Journal in 1999 Despite tales, the war in Kosovo was savage, but wasn't genocide. Stories about a Nazi-like body disposal facility were so widespread that the investigators sent a 3-man French team spelunking half a mile down the mine to search for bodies. They found none. Another team analysed ashes in the furnace. They found no teeth or other signs of burnt bodies. Why the distortion?